All right. International Financial Management, Chapter 3 will cover international financial market. For this chapter, the chapter objective would be to learn about the following: foreign exchange market, international money market, credit market, bond market, and stock markets. So the first thing that we will cover will be the foreign exchange market. Of course, all of you have heard, and some even deal in the foreign exchange market, because this market is simply to allow for exchange of one currency for the other. Example, you want to travel to Singapore. Before you travel in JB, before you cross over, or when you fly to Changi Airport, there will be a lot of money changer, right? Even in Kuala Lumpur Airport, there is all these money exchange kiosks. So this money exchange kiosk will allow you to buy the currency that you may need in the country of destination. So if you are traveling to Singapore, you will use your ringgit to buy Singapore dollar. If you are traveling to Thailand, you will use your ringgit to buy Thai baht. So how can you buy all these? Because every currency of different countries has its price, and this price is called the exchange rate. Exchange rate actually specifies the rate at which one currency can be exchanged for another. So one ringgit is not necessarily one Thai baht or one Singapore dollar. The rate is there. So it's probably one ringgit, you will get 7 Thai baht. One ringgit, probably you get 30 cents Singapore dollar. So that is the exchange rate. So in history, in the past, gold standard was used. So there was no exchange rate and all the currencies are all not stable. So people use gold. Okay, every money will convert into gold, and gold will be used to exchange for another currency. So they use gold as the standard. So then, because this is very troublesome, what if I want to bring a lot of money to another country? I need to have a lot of gold, right? And people need to keep gold all the time, right? It's very troublesome. So because of that, they came up with an agreement on fixed exchange rate. Okay, and this one was drafted in the Bretton Woods Agreement and also the Smithsonian Agreement. And thereafter, exchange rate are no longer fixed, because fixing exchange rate will give rise to a lot of problem. So which we will learn later. So now there exists a floating exchange rate system. So what is a floating exchange rate system? Where currencies that are traded are allowed to fluctuate in accordance with market forces. If you see, if you go to an exchange rate, foreign exchange market, you can see that the rate changes every day. That means today I want to buy $1, it is 4.2. Tomorrow, if I go and buy, it is 4.21, 4.22. Different. Every day is different. Even time of the day could be different. Okay, in the morning I go, it's cheaper. In the afternoon I go, it's more expensive. And why is that? Because to fix something that is not fixed, it is very troublesome. So why fix it? Just let it float, right? So the price of currency now goes up and down, which is what we call float, goes up and down every day, every different time, depending on the demand and supply of the currency. All right. So, how can you perform a foreign exchange transaction? So you can perform it through an over-the-counter market, where uh, is a network where companies normally exchange one currency for another. So let's say a company needs a lot of US dollar to buy something. Say a big Malaysian company, they want to buy, example like Air Asia. Air Asia want to buy airplane from US. So when Air Asia want to buy airplane from US, they need to pay this company in the US in US dollar. But what kind of currency are they using? Air Asia is denominated in Malaysian currency, ringgit. So if they want to pay the US company, they have to convert all their revenues from ringgit to US dollar to pay. So how do they convert? They convert through over-the-counter markets. All right. And alternatively, there are foreign exchange dealers, and these dealers serve as intermediaries in foreign exchange market. So dealers usually they keep stock. When you want to buy, let's say 10 US dollar urgent, you can go to the dealer and pay for it. So they are the middlemen. They usually have currency on hand. There's another where foreign exchange can be traded in the spot market or in the futures market. So if you need the money now, you buy it in spot. Spot means on the spot. If you don't need it today, you know that you need it tomorrow or next week. So you will not buy it today because who knows what happened next week, right? So you don't buy it today, but you buy a future. So even in exchange rate market, there is a spot and future market. Okay, because it is a very, very big market that involves a lot of transaction. So sometimes banks also trade among each other and they call it an interbank market. In the spot market, usually US dollar is the most commonly accepted medium of exchange. When you want to buy something, uh, everything can be converted to US dollar easily. Or most value of most currency, they are valued in US dollar. Okay, that is because US dollar is the most popular used currency. And spot market time zone and is usually conducted during normal business hour in a given location. Somewhere around the world, a bank is open and ready to accommodate foreign exchange requests. So during 9 to 5 p.m., if you need US dollar, you can go to any bank to buy. But after 6, after 7, after 8 p.m., all the banks are closed, right? Can you still buy foreign exchange? Yes, you can. Because when the market in Malaysia is closed, a bank in another country is open. So if you have urgent matters and if you have a big transaction, you can always contact a bank overseas to do the conversion for you. So the spot market liquidity, I would say that it is very liquid because there are many buyers and sellers. But here they say that if there are more buyers and more sellers, that means there are more liquidity. This is to compare different currencies. Like US dollar is highly liquid. If you talk about ringgit, maybe less liquid. Okay, so when you want to do a foreign exchange, you want to exchange for another currency, there are many shops. Why are there many shops? Because they are competitive. They want to compete with each other, but how different are they? How can they compete with each other? Usually banks also provide exchange rate services. How do they compete with each other? Through quotes. Competitiveness of quotes means the pricing. Next is if you have a special relationship with the bank, then maybe you get a preference rate, a special rate. The efficiency of the bank is also very important. Some banks will give additional advice, and some will even provide forecast advice. So when we talk about competitiveness of quote, we will then move on to the spread. What is spread? So in terms of foreign exchange, a bid-ask spread is actually used to cover the cost of financial transaction. Okay, so if you see the formula here, ask rate, bid rate, ask rate minus bid rate divided by ask rate, then you get the bid-ask spread. But what is this all about? Okay, so a quick example here. If you go to a local foreign exchange, you want to go to Japan, let's say you want to go to Japan. So you say, hey, uncle, I want to exchange for Japanese yen. So he will point to the board. He will point to the board behind him. He will say, nah, this is the price. So you don't understand. You see, hey, what is bid rate? What is ask rate? So basically, what is bid rate and what is ask rate? That means a bid rate means the price that he will pay you. Okay, the price that he will pay you for your money. The price he will pay you for your money. And ask rate is the price you will pay for the money. All right, so that means if you just came back from Japan, okay, if you just came back from Japan, you left with 1 yen in your pocket, and there's no such thing as 1 yen now, but because Japanese yen smallest is about 10 yen, 100 yen. Okay, let's say you have 1 yen in your pocket. So you tell the currency exchange, hey, I have 1 yen, I want to sell it to you. Will they buy? Yes. If you have 1 yen, you want to convert to dollar. Let's say you are in US now. If you have 1 yen in your pocket and you want to convert into dollar, how much dollar will you get? Will you get A or will you get B? Question is this. So, do you get A or do you get B if you want to convert your yen to US dollar? Which one? A or B? Anyone? Anyone? Yes, yen how? Correct. If you have 1 yen and you tell the foreign exchange person that you want to convert your 1 yen to dollar, they will give you 0.007 US dollar. Okay? Once you get the money and you decide, oh, no, I want back the 1 yen. I want that for souvenir. Okay? Let's say you already sold the 1 yen to him and you get this US dollar. But then after 1 minute, you change your mind. You say, hey, no lah, I want the 1 yen for souvenir. Can you get it back? Yes, you can, because they are the currency exchange. They will provide exchange services. Right? You say you want that 1 yen, you want it back. So will they sell it to you? Yes, they will. But at what rate? They will sell it to you at the rate of B. That is the ask rate. They will ask for 0.0074 for 1 yen. So that is why you see B is higher. Because they will sell it at a higher price, they will buy it from you at a lower price. You get what I mean? Okay, so that is how exchange rate exchange people, they make their money. They make money through the bid ask trade. So if there is one person before you who sell a lot of yen, so they will buy the yen at a low price. And then the second family come and they want to go Japan, so they want to buy yen. So they will take your yen and sell to this person at a higher price. So they will make the difference of 0.0004. This is the profit for them. Okay, and in technical terms, we call it as the spread. So the bigger the difference, the bigger the bid ask spread. Okay, you can see that yen, the spread is 5.4%. British pound, the spread is 5%. So the difference is in percentage. So if they sell yen, they will make 5.4%. If they sell pound, they will make 5%. This is their profit or the difference between buy and sell. So what is the reason why British pound got lower spread than Japanese yen? So here we try to understand the factors that affect this spread. Why some high, some low? I thought it's all the same. No. The factors that affect this spread size is the order cost, inventory cost, competition, volume, and currency risk. So if you buy this standard currency, that means popular currency, the spread is usually low. If you want to go Japan, Thailand, British pound, Australian dollar, US dollar, the spread is usually very low because they are very popular and very fast moving. So they are also very competitive. The volume is also very high. Currency risk is very low. Inventory cost is very low and it's not risky at all. And for the exchange rate, the cost is low because these are popular, very fast. They come very fast, they go. So they are willing to accept a lower spread. What kind of spread if, for example, they are selling what kind of what say they sell Cambodian real. Okay, Cambodian real is a currency. Is a currency of Cambodia. Cambodia. They call it real. Okay. So if you go to the currency exchange and you say, hey, I want to buy real, then they will, real, not to say that they don't have, they might have, but their quantity may be limited. Why? Because it is not popular. It is not popular. So the volume that they have is low. The risk for them to hold the currency is very high. And if they have, some people may not have. So the competition is low. Inventory cost of keeping real is high because very few people will buy or sell to them. So the cost is high. So if you want to buy real, the spread might be high. It might be 10 to 20%. Okay, compared to US dollar or British pound, where the rate is between 3 to 5%, Cambodian real spread might be 10%. Okay, so the spread might be bigger. That means the buy sell differences might be very high, the very big difference. So the moment you sell to them, you buy back, you lose a lot of money. So that is the reason of spread. Okay, so moving on, how do you interpret this foreign exchange quotation? There are two types of quotation. One is the direct quote and one is the indirect quote. A direct quote actually represents the number of foreign currency that you can buy based on dollar. So if you want to buy euro, a direct quote will quote you for what is the euro sign? Forgot what's the euro sign. Euro 1. So a direct quote you say, I want to buy €1. So the direct quote will be based on €1. So €1, you need to pay $1.40. $1 US dollar. And indirect quote, you say, I want euro, but I want indirect quote. So they won't quote you based on €1. They will quote you based on 1 USD. Okay? You say 1 USD, you will get 0.7143 euro. Okay? So how do you get an indirect quote? You take the $1 divide by direct quotation. So you take 1 divide by 1.4, you get 0.7143. So the indirect quote and direct quote is actually linked. There will be no difference. Just that how do you present the pricing of the exchange rate? Okay, how you explain the pricing based on direct or indirect. All right, so here is an example of direct and indirect quote. Okay, when you see direct, you know what it means. Indirect, you know what it means. All right. So, what about changes in exchange rate? So, how come you see, hey, last week US dollar is cheap. This week US dollar is appreciating, so it's more expensive. So how do you interpret all these changes? So how do you interpret is when you see euro is appreciating against US, the indirect exchange rate is declining. When the euro is depreciating, the indirect exchange rate is rising. Basically, appreciating or depreciating is based on the value. So you can see that euro, okay, let's say we go on direct quote lah, direct quote. So €1 equals to 1.4. When we say euro is appreciating a week later, it means €1 will become 1.5 US dollar lah. Huh? On the right is US dollar, on the left is euro. So when euro is appreciating, it means euro has become more expensive. So last week, I only need 1.4 to buy €1. This week, I need 1.5 to buy €1. And the opposite happens when euro becomes cheaper. When euro becomes cheaper over the week, it is called as depreciating. All right, so this is the relationship between direct and indirect. So in the indirect exchange, the value here increase, here will drop. Okay, this is just the indirect and direct quotation. All right, what about cross exchange rate? Cross exchange rate is when there is more than two currency. For example, this peso. Peso can be Mexican peso. Okay, Mexican currency. And dollar in terms of Canadian dollar means it's a Canadian currency. Canadian currency. So we know that one Mexican peso is equals to 0.07 US dollar. This sign here is US dollar. So you can see there is three currency in play here. One is peso, second is Canadian dollar, the third is US dollar. Three currency at play here. So I know that peso equals to US dollar. I know the rate, right? This is one. Second is I know the Canadian dollar equals to what USD. I know this rate. This is 2. But the thing I don't know is the value of peso in Canadian currency. Let's say I don't want US dollar. I want to deal with peso and Canadian dollar. How do I find out? If I only have these two info, I only have 1 and 2, how can I find the third one? We can, because we have the linkage between them. The both quotation here is based on US dollar. So how do you find the value of peso? If you want to convert from Canadian dollar, you use peso, value of peso in dollar divided by value of Canadian dollar in US dollar. So you take 0.07 divide by 0.7. So now you get this conversion rate is Canadian dollar of 10 cent is equals to 1 peso. Okay, why? You see, 1 peso equals to 0.07 dollar, and 1 Canadian dollar is equals to 0.7 US dollar. So what about 1 peso? How many Canadian dollar? We take 0.07 divided by 0.7. If you want to know the value of C in P, how do you do that? You take 0.7 divided by 0.07, and you get what? You get, how much is this? 10. Okay, 10. 10 means what? 10 means value of Canadian dollar in peso. Okay, means 10 peso equals to 1 Canadian dollar. Alright, so you can see that mathematics is not difficult here. It's only to understand what you are trying to calculate. What divide what gives you a different interpretation altogether. So you cannot just take 0.7 divided by 0.07, or this is what it means. No, you need to know what it actually means when you calculate something. Okay, so what is the denominator and what is top, what is bottom is very important to come up with what you actually want. All right, any questions so far? Anyone has any questions so far? Guys, are you still here? Do you have any question? All okay, yeah? Okay, we are halfway through. Let's have a short break and come back at 12. Is that okay? We come back at 12 and we continue. All right. So I will see you in 10 minutes time at 12. Okay, everyone, welcome back. We are back. Just raise your hand. All right, thank you. So, continue from where we stopped. What we have covered so far is about exchange rate, right? Quotation, how it's being quoted, direct and indirect. And all this happen in the uh, spot market. Now we are going slightly more advanced to the possibility of currency being traded in the forward and futures market. So in this context, we are talking about currency derivatives. That means we don't buy the currency for the use immediately, but we buy in the future for certain reasons. Maybe for the use in the future or for investment purpose. All right. So the first thing that we will try to understand is how forward contract is being used. So forward contract in foreign exchange market is where there is an agreement between foreign exchange dealer and an MNC, a multinational company, that specifies the currency to be exchanged, the exchange rate, and the date at which the transaction will occur. So the date will be a future date. So this is a contract to buy a currency for the future. So the forward rate is the exchange rate specified by the contract. So we don't go with the bid ask spread of the spot market. There will be a totally different rate called the forward rate. And this will be happening in the forward market because these are where all the forward contracts are being traded. Apart from forward, because forward is very specific. Let's say I want certain amount of currency at certain point in time. That's very specific. But what about futures contract? Futures is more standardized. So it is similar to forward contract, but actually it is standardized and sold on the exchange. So it is like packed already, ready packed, and it is for you to buy. If you want, you buy. If you don't want, you sell, or things like that. You don't have to create a contract from scratch. So it specifies the standard volume and a particular currency for a specified date. And the future rate is the exchange rate where you buy or sell for the settlement in the future. And the future spot rate is the spot rate that will exist at a future point in time and is uncertain as of today. So what you know today is the futures rate. But when the point in time where you reach almost the date of where you agree to buy, then it will become a future spot rate. Means your contract, your future is a contract. It's not a currency. But towards the future, when you reach to the date that you have agreed, that time there will be a future spot rate. Okay. So apart from those two derivatives, the third one is an options. So you know what is an options? An option is the right to buy or a sell at a specified period of time. So there is also a market for this. So it is all contract and not the underlying currency. Not the currency, but a contract. All right. So why exchange rate market is so important and it covers one whole topic is because the international money market of currency is very huge. And they say that the money market has grown because companies are all over the world may need to borrow to pay for imports, okay, to pay for imports. And they may also choose to borrow currency in a different country. So they maybe do not want to borrow from Malaysia. They want to borrow from Japan because the interest rate there is lower. It's possible. And people might also choose to borrow from a currency that is expected to depreciate. So by the time they return or repay this money, it becomes cheaper to repay. Okay, people take advantage of uh, international money market as well as the appreciation or depreciation of the exchange rate. So, the origins and development of international money market can be traced back to this European money market that is developed in 1960s and 1970s. And also Asian money market, mostly centered around Hong Kong and Singapore, are mostly involving dollar denominated deposit. As you know, Asia is developing. It's not really developed, so we have a lot of business dealings with the Western world, such as US and Europe. That is why the money market or foreign exchange is in demand. So, what about interest rate? When we talk about international money market, the international interest rates also plays a part in influencing the exchange rate. All right, so here we summarize as money market interest rate in any country is dependent on demand for short-term funds for borrowers relative to supply. Money market rates vary due to differences in interaction of total supply of short-term funds. That means it simply means that the interest rates is dependent on supply and demand in the short-term fund. So if there is very high demand, low supply, then the interest rate will be high because the demand is high. But if the supply is high and the demand is low, then the interest rate will be low because there is oversupply of short-term funds. All right, so comparison of money market interest rate, you can see that Japan has the lowest interest rate, Brazil has the highest interest rate. Why is this happening? Simply because you can expect Japanese people, they save a lot. So whatever earnings they put into the bank and they don't really use this money. So that is why there is a lot of supply. And do they borrow a lot? Not so much. They don't really borrow as much as other countries. So that is why there is a high supply but low demand, therefore pushing their interest rates to be low. As for Brazil, perhaps the opposite. The global interaction of money market interest rate is explained by money market interest rate among countries are highly correlated over time. That means uh, Malaysia interest rate will be related to US interest rate. It will be related, surely, because of the exchange rate. Later we'll see one theory that link them together. Therefore, we can see that when economies weaken, when economy is weak, company need for liquidity declines. Means company do not need so much money and corporation will reduce the amount of short-term funds they wish to borrow. All right. And when economy's conditions strengthen, there will be a need for expansion and companies will need additional liquidities to support their expansion. Very simple. You see, last year, upon lockdown, last year, March, we had lockdown, right? 1-2 months after lockdown, you notice that Malaysia interest rate dropped. And then now it is still low. Why? Because a lot of companies cannot expand, so they cut back on expenditure. Every employee work from home, a lot of shopping mall closed, so that they decided not to continue with their business. Plus, they don't even want to expand. When they don't expand, then the money is left there. A lot of supply of money, but there is no demand, right? So therefore, they reduce the amount of funds they need. But now, when economic condition is improving, then you see a lot of people going out. Then a lot of companies, a lot of restaurants start operating again. Now they might consider expansion. They might want to open from one shop to two shop to five shops. And because of this expansion, they will need funds. They will need liquidity. Okay, and this is how supply and demand will later on influence interest rates. So international money market securities, what are they? They are actually debt issued by MNC and government agencies with short-term maturity. And these securities are perceived to be very safe because they are borrowed by very big companies or by governments, even countries. So even that, these securities are, although they are not exposed to credit risk, they are exposed to exchange rate risk. That means by the time they borrow and by the time they repay the money that they borrow, there might be a change in exchange rate. For example, um, Sanjita borrow 1,000 US dollar from me because I am working in US and I'm very rich. So Sanjita borrow money 1,000 US dollar from me. Okay, so Sanjita is in Malaysia. She will take my $1,000, sell it in the market to get ringgit. So probably at this point in time, $1 equals to 4 ringgit. So 1,000, Sanjita will have 4,000. Okay. But 1 year later, by the time Sanjita graduate and wants to repay me this 1,000 US dollar, she goes to the exchange market and find out that hey, 1 US dollar is only 3 ringgit right now. So she borrowed $1,000 from me. How much she need in ringgit? She only need 3,000 ringgit to repay me. So you see that she borrowed 1,000 US dollar, she got 4,000 ringgit. But when she repay me 1,000 US dollar, she only need to spend 3,000 ringgit. Therefore, you can see that exchange rate is in Sanjita's favor. So ringgit has appreciated, so it's good for Sanjita. Okay, she used less ringgit to pay back her loan. But things can go opposite. What happens if 1 US dollar becomes 5 ringgit? And that point in time, Sanjita will have to pay me 5,000, although she borrowed only 4,000 ringgit. Right? So exchange rate, there is a risk whether it will turn to your favor or against you. Okay, so this kind of risk you have to be aware, and if possible, you need to be cautious. So the international money market, credit market, instead of just short term, companies may also get medium or long term funds. Okay, any loans that are 1 year or longer is called medium term funds. And in order to avoid this kind of risk, bank will use the floating rate, which is tied to the LIBOR. So they worry that interest rate will fluctuate, will change over time. So to protect themselves, they will quote every borrowing in LIBOR. All right. So still, you do not remove the exchange rate risk. Interest rate risk remove, but exchange rate risk is not removed. So credit market in the international money market has regulation. So there is a European Act, there is a Basel record. So I don't want to go too deeply into this. All right, so let's you can read this on yourself. And moving on, we talk about syndicated loans in the credit market. So when you see syndicated loans, that means usually one bank is not willing to lend that amount. So this one bank, they will join with other banks to form a syndicate. So a group of banks to provide the loan. All right, so what happens during the credit crisis that affects the credit market? So in 2008, that it was a very big crisis. It triggered a default in subprime loans, leading to a halt in housing development, which reduced income, spending, and jobs, where financial institutions became cautious with their funds and were less willing to lend funds to MNC. So what happened in 2008 was a domino effect. So although 2008 the crisis only happened in US, it actually spread to the whole world because it is linked. As you know, international money market is linked. So what happened to US will also affect other countries as well. So what happened was the liquidity was affected. When all the liquidity in US is stuck, the whole world will also feel it. So moving on to the international bond market. So when we move from money market to bond market, that means we are talking about the long-term loan. Okay, longer term. So what do you see in the international bond market are foreign bonds and euro bonds. So foreign bonds are issued by borrowers foreign to the country where the bond is placed. Like for example, Malaysia wants to borrow money to build a tower, but they cannot borrow from Malaysia because Malaysia probably the funds are low, or maybe Malaysia the interest rate is high. So what Malaysian can do, Malaysian government, they can go to Japan and issue a foreign bond there. So a foreign bond of Malaysia in Japan, this is called foreign bond because the borrower is a Malaysian, but they issue a bond in another country, which is Japan. So this is a foreign bond. Reason being, they try to benefit from the low interest rate there. So if Malaysia interest rate is 3% or 4%, so when they want to sell the bond, they will have to pay an interest rate of about 3 or 4%. But if they sell this bond in Japan, the interest rate there is low, maybe 1 or 2%. So when they borrow in Japan, they only need to pay an interest of 1 or 2%. So much cheaper to borrow from Japan. But again, there is one risk that they have to be aware, which is when the time it comes to pay back this borrowing or to redeem this bond, by that time, Japanese yen might appreciate. When Japanese yen appreciate, when they pay back to these Japanese lenders, it might cost more. So they might save in terms of interest or coupons, but when times it comes to repaying them, the cost might be higher. Okay, so this is another risk that is in the international bond market. So euro bonds are the same thing, but it relates to 3 countries. So Malaysian selling bond in Japan, but this bond is not denominated in yen, it's denominated in US dollar. So a three country involvement is called a euro bond. All right. So these are some details about Euro bonds. And next we go on to the development of other bond markets. So bond markets have developed in Asia, South America, and yields of bond market tend to be highly correlated because bond also depend on interest rates, right? Interest rate will determine the price of bond. So as you know, interest rate of different countries are correlated. Therefore, bond market yields are also highly correlated. When economic conditions weaken or strengthen, the demand and supply of these funds will change. All right, so when you issue, sell, or when you buy an international bond, these are the risks that you need to be aware of. There are credit risks that relates to default. So how do you avoid these credit risks? Buy only bonds that are issued by reputable companies or countries. Well, will you buy a Portuguese bond? Will you buy a Greek bond? Will you buy an Italian bond? Or do you prefer to buy a US bond? Do you prefer to buy a Singapore bond? Okay, if you are worried about credit risk, buy from a highly reputable seller, issuer. Okay, interest rate risk, where interest rate might increase or decrease, it might affect the value of your bond. Exchange rate risk also, upon maturity of your bond, you might get less than what you invested. And liquidity risk is when the market of your bond that you buy is not liquid. Okay, when it is not liquid, the value will drop. And just like buying a car, why Malaysians like to buy, Myvi? Myvi is popular, right? Toyota, very popular, right? Okay, what if you buy a Hyundai? Compare the second-hand value of a Hyundai and a Toyota. Which one is better? Toyota, right? Because Toyota has lower liquidity risk. It is easier to sell and reliable in long term. So second-hand market, the value is high because the liquidity is there. But for the same amount of years, the second-hand car for Hyundai might not be so good. So the value of Hyundai car might drop a lot. This is one reason why Malaysians, they don't like to buy these less liquid cars because the second-hand value is much lower. All right. Okay, moving on. How you can see that a crisis can affect the value of bonds. So in 2010, Greece had weak economy and it affects the value of their bond. And what are the concerns that spread? They actually spread to neighboring European countries such as Spain, Portugal, and Ireland that also had large budget deficit. So how did they came out of that? All those countries that have are in much better position, they offer them a loan. Okay, they offer them a loan so that they can settle off their outstanding bonds. So Greek, what happened was they borrowed through bonds, but because of bad management of funds, when the bonds were due, they were not able to pay back. So when they cannot pay back this bond, what happened? When you borrow from the bank and you cannot pay back, what happened? The bank will declare you as bankrupt, right? So Greece the same. They borrow from US, they borrow from England, they borrow from many countries, but when the time to pay back, they cannot pay. So what happens? Greece will be bankrupt, right? So in order to prevent the country from going bankrupt, all other countries try to save them by giving them new loans, long-term loans to settle the old one. All right. So moving on, international stock markets is also a very big portion of how it relates to the exchange rate because nowadays funds can flow from different countries to different countries. And why US company will try to sometimes issue stock in a foreign market, basically to enhance their global image. All right. So there are sometimes foreign companies will issue stock in the US, and this is in order to tap on whatever benefit that they have. If you can see, you know Malaysia, there is one company called Nirvana. You heard of Nirvana, guys? You know what is Nirvana? Are you aware of this company called Nirvana? Nirvana. Heard of this now? Okay, you heard of that, right? Nirvana. It's a very big company, you know. They more sort of they are a company that provide services to people who die. So when you die, then you can contact Nirvana. They will solve all your burial related matters. But this Nirvana is so big. But you want to own Nirvana, can you buy their stock? Not in Malaysia. Their stock is being sold in Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so their stock is listed in stock market in Hong Kong, not in Malaysia. There are reasons for that. There are reasons for that. So therefore, it is not surprising that companies that are not from US will want to list their shares on US because they think that market in the US are easily traded and they become more popular if they list in US. However, there are some US companies decided not to place their stocks in US because of compliance of certain law. So they think that this Sarbanes-Oxley Act of foreign stock is very strict. So they prefer to list in United Kingdom instead. All right. So can investors purchase stocks outside of the home country? Yes, definitely. And recently, many firms outside US has been issuing stocks. All right, so here you can see the comparison of stock exchange as of 2008, how many numbers of companies listed and the market capitalization of all these companies in each country. Okay, so this stock exchange market is very big, yeah. And how market characteristics vary among countries. So different countries, although they are big companies, the market characteristics is different because in some countries, managers are encouraged to make decisions that serve shareholders' interests, but some they have certain restrictions. So factors that influence trade activity includes the voting power, legal protection of shareholders, government enforcement, corporate corruption, and level of financial disclosure. So these are the impact of government governance on stock market participation. So if there is low level of corruption and high level of financial disclosure, there will have greater transparency and it will lead to greater participation. Okay, so how important is the financial market in serving multinational companies? Is when corporate functions requires foreign exchange market. So there are very few big companies that don't need foreign exchange. Most big companies nowadays will need foreign exchange market because trade are now borderless. You deal with business clients from a different country. You have direct foreign investments or investors from a different country. Or when you want to sell something, the local buyer will not buy, a foreign buyer will buy. All right, and sometimes when you need loan, you cannot rely just on the local uh, funds. You may also consider foreign funds, whether it's short term or long term. All right, so these are how international money market affect MNC. All right, so in summary, this whole chapter tries to relate how international exchange, foreign exchange, will be important or play an important role to multinational companies, whether in terms of money market, bond market, or stock market. All right, so your tutorial to boost your understanding of this chapter will be from chapter 3 of your textbook, Madura International Financial Management, page 88. There are 5 questions here. These 5 questions will be important and useful to test your understanding on how the factors can affect all these exchange rate and the international money market.